Welcome to Rabbit Trails for Cyborg Bunnies. Today I'm going to be rereading a paper that I gave in May of 2022. My paper is titled Gleaning the Fields: How the Age of Aquarius Was Subverted. When the internet first came out, it was believed that it would usher in a new era where peace will guide the planets and love will steer the stars. The age of Aquarius was supposed to be a time when innovators and dreamers were in ascendance. Cross-cultural research shows that with the internet, people could practice their own spirituality while participating in a genuine universalism, birthing an entirely new in-group of holistic individualism. The internet was celebrated as a renaissance, a way of finally connecting people all over the globe in real time. Yet shortly after, Wired magazine came out calling it a revolution and promised corporations that with the internet, it would provide them a marketplace of unlimited growth. To achieve unlimited growth, the age of Aquarius self-transcendence was transformed into self-enhancement, a subtle but radical change. The hypereconomy has been a key player in changes in lifestyle that have had a significant negative impact on our world. Corporations cannot have unlimited growth on a planet with limited resources. The world is on a crash course to disaster. But there is a contingency here where humanity can do other, and that is the core of the whole environmentalist ideology. We can choose to abandon the path we are on and pursue a more spiritual lifestyle. This paper will look at 3 spiritual principles we can pursue. 1. Reclaiming a biblical model for gleaning the fields. Leviticus 19, 9-10. 2. Keeping Sabbath. Exodus 20, 8-11. And 3. Being content. 1 Timothy 6, 6-8. I propose these 3 simple changes on a global level could radically reduce the human footprint on the ecology and help us live in harmony with both our fellow humans and the animals that we share our planet with, reducing technology to a mere tool, not a telos. The game changer: reclaiming a biblical model for gleaning the fields. Leviticus 19, 9-10 says, "Now when you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not reap the very corners of your field, neither shall you gather the gleanings of your harvest. Nor shall you glean your vineyard, nor shall you gather the fallen fruit of your vineyard. You shall leave them for the needy and the stranger. I am the Lord your God." When the landowner and his hired hands had finished the harvest, the rest of the community who had need was allowed to come and harvest the corners of the field. Both humans and animals could eat of the gleanings, eating all the grain and fruit that had dropped to the ground. If the poor did not harvest the corners of a particular field, this allowed for the wild growth to avoid monoculture and provided safe homes in the wildlife in the area. Biblical gleaning methods benefited the pollinators and the wildlife as well as the humans who lived there. It is an example of how God expects humanity to work with nature and to provide for the wildlife as well. Another version of this is Deuteronomy 24, 19-22, which adds, "When you beat your olive trees, you shall not go over the boughs again. It shall be for the alien, for the orphan, and for the widow." Thus, we see that the biblical mandate includes all harvests, not just grain fields and grape vineyards. All the land in Israel was kept within clan holdings and could not be sold on a permanent basis. So those without a land stake would never have one. Thus God made provision for those people to work and to be fed. There was also the conditional that providing means for the non-landowners to work was a prerequisite for God to bless and provide an increase. The biblical model expanded throughout Europe with the spread of Christianity. Landowners were still required not to glean their fields, but allow the poor to do so. With the increase in cities, community green spaces became common. People could feed their flocks on designated fields owned by others. Gleaning rights changed in the 1700s when the French government became increasingly concerned with individual, read private, property, primarily for the taxation purposes. In England, commoners' access was denied under the ruling in Steele v. Houghton in 1788, where a private landowner sued a woman for trespassing. She claimed it was her legal right under both the parish enforcement of Mosaic law and under British common law. The judge sided with the landowner and ruled that gleaning was a privilege, not a right, and removed the parish's main means of supporting the poor. Marshman and Scott's article addresses research on modern gleaning initiatives, particularly in an urban Canadian context. In modern initiatives, gleaning is used to refer to harvesting fresh surplus food where it is grown, foraging, dumpster diving, food redistribution, and food bank gardening. According to Marshman and Scott, 28 formal gleaning projects have emerged in Canada, and while the structure of each project may vary, they all share the goals of reducing food waste, community building, improved access to local food, knowledge, and sharing, and addressing climate changes. Each one of these issues has a direct link to food security. Community food security, CFS, includes not only hunger relief, but also sustainable food production through the empowerment of marginalized people. Quite obviously, community food security is not in the corporate interest. Most supermarkets lock their dumpsters to prevent the poor from getting food and products they haven't paid for, simply because it increases profit when the starving are required to pay for food they cannot afford. CFS would not disrupt the capitalist system. It merely returns to an economic localism, a community-based focus where profits from large megacorps would drop, but family-owned local businesses would once again thrive. I do not believe that a corporation that made $8 billion in profit last year must make even more profit next year to be a success. I think that making $5 billion in profit is a huge success. If that were reduced down to even $3 billion in profit in a year, I think that's an amazing amount of money that is profit. Klein makes an important distinction on the nature of the obligation God puts on the landowners. Quote, "Concerning the gleanings, the text says, 'You shall leave them for the poor and the stranger.' They are not given to the poor. They must be left for the poor to pick for themselves. The owner of the field is required to leave something in the field when he or she harvests." End quote. This is in direct contrast to modern-day welfare, initially designed to aid the poor through difficult financial times, but it has turned into an economical system of dependency. Corporations now glean these fields exhaustively, buying out their competition, trying to own every single instance of what they produce, and relegating the government to take care of the poor. Yet, corporations are not ephemeral entities existing only on paper. Each corporation is a collection of individuals making moral choices with moral consequences. I propose that if we understand the Bible mandate is that the wealthy are to leave work for those less fortunate, it should be socially and morally unacceptable for large corporations to buy out startups and family-owned businesses to increase their unlimited profits. Klein's article divides the commands given in Leviticus 19 into two columns. The left column, L, defined as religious. The right column, R, defined as ethical. In a world that increasingly takes pluralism and secular to mean atheist and no religion, Klein makes key comments on the nature of the ethical commands. Quote, "There are references to God in 3 of the units in column R. AR, you shall not swear falsely by my name, profaning the name of God. BR, you shall fear your God. DR, you shall observe my laws. None of these mention rituals or worship. They all relate to God as the ultimate guarantor of social order. End quote. Of particular note is his addition to Wenham's analysis. Quote, the relational terms as identified by Wenham appear in the above table, with one addition. I have added laborer, hired hand, from BR, because it too is a relational term. End quote. Thus, taking it one step further, according to Klein, proper exegesis of Leviticus 19 has God identifying the relationship between the megacorporation and their employees in the same category as brother, fellow, countryman, and neighbor. 1/7 of my life for me, keeping the Sabbath. Exodus 20:8-11 reads, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the 7th day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. In it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter, your male or female servant, or your cattle, or your sojourner who stays with you. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that is in them, and rested on the 7th day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Keeping the Sabbath is part of the 10 Commandments. While Jesus fulfilled the ceremonial law, the 10 Commandments are part of the Sinai covenant, things that must be done to be in good relationship with God. Exodus 31:17 describes the Sabbath as a perpetual covenant for all generations. Followers of the Sabbath greet each other with Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat, rest. Shalom, peace, contentment, fullness, to be complete. In Matthew 11:28, Jesus promises, come to me, all you that are weary and carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. An example of the practical nature of Shabbat is found in Exodus 16:23-24, when the Israelites were in the wilderness and needed to gather manna on a daily basis. If the Israelites tried to gather more than they could eat in that day, the manna went bad and became worm-infested by the next morning. On the day before the Sabbath, Moses told the Israelites, this is what the Lord meant. Tomorrow is a Sabbath observance, a holy Sabbath to the Lord. Bake what you will bake, boil what you will boil, and all that is left over put aside to be kept until the morning. So they put it aside until morning, as Moses had ordered, and it did not become foul, nor were there any worms in it. Any manna they gathered that wasn't consumed spoiled overnight, except for the manna for the Sabbath. And for those who did not trust the Lord and went out to gather the manna on the Sabbath, there was none to be found. That would speak rather strongly against gathering more than you need and stockpiling the wealth of the world to yourself. God can provide more if necessary, and preserve what is already gathered if necessary. But greed becomes worms. Gordon summarizes modern life as, we've become acclimated to distraction, to multitasking, to giving part of our attention to many things at once, while almost never devoting the entire attention of the entire soul to anything. He recommends the close reading of literature as the antidote, because it is time-consuming and it requires the concentration of the entire person. Reading literature also cultivates the sensibility of significance. Taking time to do something time-consuming but significant. That is the value of the Sabbath. Blanks did a professional project entitled Keeping Holy Time, Embracing Sabbath as a Life Practice at Princeton University. As an ordained itinerant elder in the African Methodist Episcopal Church, and a university chaplain, and the dean of religious life and the chapel, first at Brown University and then at Princeton, Blanks offers a unique perspective on following this aspect of Mosaic law in a high-stress, demanding environment. Blanks says that to keep Sabbath is to embrace the holiness of time and to realize that it is truly a precious gift to pause long enough to experience the Kairos reality of God with us. Crowther, Smith, and Spence describe Kairos time as an existential temporal experience that is rich in significant sacred meaning, a time of emergent insight rarely spoken about in practice, yet touches everyone present. Kairos time is revealed as a moment in and beyond time. It has a temporal, enigmatic mystery involving spiritual connectedness. Clearly, the Sabbath is not meant to be just another obligation one puts on one's schedule. Sabbath activities vary, but all involve the key concept of not working. In ancient Egypt, the month was divided into 3 10-day weeks. People worked 9 days and were given half a day off on the 10th. So the idea of Sabbath, taking a full day rest every 7 days, was a radical but welcome paradigm change. To the question, when you hear the word Sabbath, what kinds of emotion or thoughts does it evoke? One of Blank's responders replied, quote, I would say it invokes rest, peacefulness, and serenity. I think, especially at Princeton, it is a time where it's like, it's finally Shabbat, finally the Sabbath. There's a big sigh of relief, end quote. It becomes muscle memory to relax, to stop the anxiety over performance and the to-do list. Your body prepares itself to enjoy the company of friends and family, to just be and have a good time. That is why keeping Sabbath is so refreshing mentally and physically. Blanks acknowledges that Sunday is not an exclusive day of rest, because the work of the church summons us to do, even in the midst of the divine call to be. She describes living counterculturally and honoring the divine rhythm of life by keeping Sabbath, in a world where sleep deprivation is considered a badge of honor, to be a profound act of faith. When we keep Sabbath, we spend at least, at a minimum, 1/7 of our lives in the sacred. Reaching a global conclusion, being content. John Wesley asks a provocative question, how is it with your soul? Most of us live cluttered, materialistic lives, and it is no surprise that the planet we live on reflects our spiritual condition. Ergo, a relaxed, sacred inner life would mean a relaxed, sacred planet. But this would mean living counterculturally, turning off our media for substantial amounts of time, limiting corporations' unlimited growth back to a reasonable amount of profit. The religious response to a hyper-economy is to be content. 1 Timothy 6:6-8 says, but godliness actually is a means of great gain when accompanied by contentment. For we have brought nothing into the world, so we cannot take anything out of it either. And if we have food and covering, with these we shall be content. Climate change is a reality. The planet has been experiencing climate change for thousands of years, millions if you believe in evolution. What we can do is reduce the negative human impact on the environment and start working with nature again instead of against it. A timeless God creates time to interact with his creation. Therefore, time is a sacred event. Sabbath is a recognition of the pattern of life itself. We were created to be in relationship with the Creator. Taking just one day out of the week to celebrate this, not as a legalistic obligation, but as a sacred ritual where we relax and enjoy life. When we trust God by taking a Sabbath, He brings forth an abundance. That abundance, when shared by allowing for gleaning, serves to benefit both society and the environment. And by doing this, we would be content. For Jesus said, "I have come to give you life, and that more abundantly." Thank you for listening, and join me next week on Rabbit Trails for Cyborg Bunnies.